If there's one thing that winds me up when watching a tutorial is the word obvious or obviously. It has connotations. It basically is from the tutor. I know this, and I know this is basic information that most of you should know. But to me, watching a tutorial, nothing is obvious. And whenever I hear obviously, I'm belittled. So whenever I do these tutorials, I always ask the person I'm editing with to do an obvious and obviously pass. Where this tutorial is concerned, for many of you, I'm going to state the bloody obvious. The ones of you who go, yeah, obviously, you may be surprised to find out that I think you're doing something wrong. The first rule of getting the best out of orchestral samples to harness the incredible textural possibilities of an orchestra is a very, very simple one that most people don't adhere to, and that is the volume of your speakers. Now, I've spoken often about the importance of using controller information with an orchestra. I use 2 faders, and I think if you use just one, I honestly think it's wrong. But that's not the wrong thing I'm here to talk about today. This should, in your room, be uncomfortable to listen to. You should get the sensation that if you were to continue listening at that volume, that you would basically ask someone to turn it down. You would want to turn it down. It should be uncomfortable. The reason why we still use orchestras to this day is a combination of the immense amount of heritage and experience of creating that technology behind the instruments that play it, the skill that goes into it, but also that thing that made the piano so successful, and the clue is in the name. Piano, short for pianoforte, at last a keyboard instrument that can go loud and soft, or rather soft then loud. This was a big deal, and it's why the piano is so dominant. It should give you a clue. Music is about nuance. It's about loud and soft, seductively whispering, shouting angrily. And whilst you should be happy to have someone whisper to you continuously, them shouting at you is something that you only want to experience periodically. This is exactly what we should apply to the way in which we make music. There's another problem, and that is gain staging. We work within software that's designed more around engineering than it is certainly orchestral programming. And there is a mindset there, which is you should have things sitting at a certain volume. This comes from the age of tape, where if you were recording something quiet, you'd turn it up to tape so that you didn't get loads of tape hiss. And rather, if you were playing something very loud, you wouldn't have continuous distortion. We live in a digital age. All you're listening to now is digital silence. It doesn't matter how quietly or loudly I turn up my speaker knob, it won't make a difference. And whilst if you get a mix engineer to engineer your orchestral stuff, they may lament the fact that they can't see any of the waveforms, it doesn't fucking matter. Your loud should be uncomfortably loud, but more importantly, your quiet should be audible to you when you're writing. Without a controller, with one controller, better, 2 controllers. I observe the way people monitor, and most people would not be able to hear. This is so quiet, but totally audible to me. The reason I have it so it sounds uncomfortable is so that it is used as a form of extreme expression, that I have that full bandwidth, that headroom. And the great thing about what I do, I write music for film, TV, and games, is I have a reference point, and that is dialogue. So when I set my levels at the beginning of a job, I set it to the dialogue. So the loudest point of a film will usually be someone shouting. It won't be a gunshot or anything like that. It'll be someone shouting. It'll certainly be the thing that makes you go, whoa, like that. I set that at a point that is just above comfort, slightly uncomfortable. If I'm working on an action sequence, I will hit a dim switch to reduce the level I'm working at, so I'm not exposing myself too much. But the idea is that we concentrate on the nuanced, quiet, seductive layers and use loud, use forte, fortissimo, the 3Fs, whatever that's called. We use that as a tool of emotion, not as just a level that we set arbitrarily. So what I do is I set the where my volume knob sits, and that gives me a kind of relative sense of loudness, not just within a cue, not just compared to the dialogue, but compared to the entire show. So maybe the first act starts with something dramatic and loud, a shape of things to come. The second act spends a lot of time really, really quiet. But I always have somewhere to go. And that point is a point of discomfort. I'm not encouraging you to blare music out of your speakers for 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's all about having dynamic control. And if you feel that you're overexposing yourself, simply bring your speakers down. But I'm talking about setting a nominal volume. When I remember working with this fantastic mix engineer, but he just changed the master volume all the time when playing stuff back. And I'm so used to working at one volume for an entire job, very rarely dimming unless I'm working on a really hardcore action sequence. I was literally out to sea. I couldn't understand my own music because the variation in dynamic is so crucial to my forms of expression, particularly when, because I'm not particularly well trained, I don't have a massive selection of notes to work from. So for me, it's all about, I don't have the poetic language. I can't just stand there and articulate stuff. So for me, it's about that. Let's just have a listen to how I would work with a pizzicato. So these ones, they don't go as loud as I'd like. So I'm actually going to re-attenuate the main volume. Make sure that we're up full expression. Yeah, that's really quite unpleasant. So that's like dilating my pupils. But you'll notice on the meters, it's not causing any problems. But in here, excuse my French, it's fucking loud, which basically means I can hear this. In fact, that's even too loud for me. And it's great because when it's up there and it's blaring through, you can hear it. You can hear the fingers doing their naughty plucking work. So for me, no matter how experienced you are, I really do urge you to use the two controllers. Now, if you're not capable of performing this stuff in live, or it feels a bit alien to you, it's simply something that you can program afterwards. And certainly with the example of these pizzicatos, you can really play around and surprise your audience with where these things really stick out. If you're just giving your dubbing engineer, the guy who mixes the dialogue and the sounds and the music together, if you're giving him a big waveform of sausage meat, he knows that he's going to have to really shape that around the dialogue. And we don't have the schedules these days for that kind of monkey business. And often we don't have the budgets for music editors who will do some shaping for us. So for me, it's really important to give them something highly dynamic, which they can pull back if they need to. But most of the time, they're even struggling to hear it ever so slightly. That way, you'll get the dynamic range that you need to basically take advantage of the insane forces that an orchestra can provide. You know, so often I will go in to a concert hall and watch a bit of classical music, and it's just like, oh, this is really, really quiet. But by the third movement, when they're really like hammering it, really leathering it, it's like, whoa, takes you on a ride. Think about a rave, you know, when they take you down, and then it goes up. These are all, you know, massively emotional tools for us. Is not just volume, it is the difference in volume. And if you're not monitoring correctly, if you're monitoring too quietly, you will not hear the quiet stuff, so you won't write it quiet enough. And the loud stuff will not be loud enough for you. So do subscribe if you haven't done. Lots of stuff like this coming up soon. One of those really helps a small startup like this. And do put some questions in the video description down below. I do read them, and if I can answer them, I will. And I won't use the word obvious, obviously.